one of its appeals is the fact that it can help small business owners, people on marginal incomes, and that sort of thing. Everybody's due for a raise, and we underpay everyone. But that aside, I've posted a link in the chat comments of a calculator I put together early last year. And I haven't made it very public yet because it was mostly to try and convince my party first. So it actually uses a wealth tax, basically. And it proves that you can only have to tax about 0.65% of the population on a wealth tax in order to fund a UBI, which meets the basic standard of living. So give it a look, see what you think, and use it as ammunition if you need it. I'm open to being contacted for if you have questions about it.
One person you should be in touch with is Peter Zing from Singularity University, because they're talking about having a hackathon where they would be doing a bunch of UBI modeling. Zing with a Z-I-N-G. And if you message any of us, I'm sure anyone who's involved in this will be able to help you get in touch with him as well. He's a regular attendee of these discussions, not with us this particular one, but you should definitely reach out to him.
Thanks for you mentioning UB, but I wasn't going to mention it. What I was going to say is that it seems strange to me that we are discussing what would be a complete transformational change in our society. But we're only discussing one side, a side where everybody basically is agreed on the moral or philosophical benefit of a UBI. What we're not discussing is what the public is upset about, and that is how do we pay for it? So I think we ought to, well, one thing we could consider is couching the discussion of a UBI within a quite serious reform of taxation. There are so many forms of taxation that we don't use at all. Financial transactions tax, carbon tax, there's a whole series of other things. And I think it would be very good to us to put this to the public. How do you want to be taxed? Do you want to be taxed like you are now, in which case we'll have to do this to pay for this? Or do you want to introduce, say, a financial transactions tax, which would evenly cover it, or a death tax? So if you put the whole lot together, then the public might accept it as a good package. But at the moment, it's just something we can't afford. Anyhow, think about it.
First, I want to say one thing is we did do the last discussion we had. The last of these talks was the big picture, taxation, inflation, funding a UBI. And in that, I presented my point of view, which is that actually, I think we have what we're seeing right now and what we've seen throughout history is that the reality is that taxes don't fund spending. If you want to tax, it's because you want to prevent something. Taxing is about stopping inequality. Taxing is about stopping carbon pollution. Taxing is about preventing inflation by pulling money out of the economy in places where it's getting too hot. That's my personal point of view. So my view is that we actually don't, to talk about everything on this sort of zero sum, if we spend money here, we've got to tax someone there thing, is inaccurate for a start. For example, right now what's happening is that the Reserve Bank is buying government bonds from the open market. So we're already using money printing to fund government spending. We've done that historically when there's been a major project like a war, or a major economic program. It's how we're doing infrastructure spending now. So this idea of having to balance the budget, I feel, is like a bit of I'll get Tim's response as well, but I think that it's a bit of a trick that's used as an excuse for not being able to do things that would actually benefit the population, as an excuse for keeping the population desperate, where we're always told that, how are you going to pay for it? The money's going to run out. And I don't think that that's actually real, and I don't think we should play into that. But Tim, that's one of my bugbears personally. What's your response to that?
So I'm very, very sympathetic to the modern monetary theory approach, which I think, as I understand it, and I'm not an economist, rings true in many ways. Where I differ from it is kind of from a political strategy point of view, actually, which is that in fact, by not talking about tax and taxing certain sectors, we actually lose a really powerful political tool, in fact. And I would embrace that approach, Colin. One of the things I'm actually really interested in about the UBI conversation, and I totally acknowledge I skipped over it completely today, but there's so much depth to this question, you just can't talk about everything. one of the reasons I'm really interested in the idea is because it does actually open up space to say, how do we make our tax and spend system, how do we make our economy fairer? How do we make it send the right signals? And I think Douglas's point that we could introduce a wealth tax on, a substantial tax on a very small number of very rich people, that would raise enough money to cover the cost of something like this, is actually, whether or not under MMT it's accurate, it's actually a very politically powerful thing to say, because it would be immensely popular, I dare say, immensely popular. So I think that's kind of the slight differentiation that I have there with the main MMT approach. And I guess I would note, kind of drawing it back to that previous point, and I take the point and feel my wrist a little bit slapped on saying a small payment wouldn't make a difference. And yes, it would make a difference to the people who are really struggling, very, very much so. The cynic in me says, if those people were a powerful constituency, we wouldn't be having this conversation. It kind of doesn't matter if it makes a difference to the poorest politically. We need to make a difference to the vast bulk of people in the middle and show them what a difference it makes, because that's where the political power, unfortunately, currently lies. And one of the reasons we need a UBI is to change that. So, yeah.
I want to jump in there really quickly. I think that there's a broader question of the sort of closing off of political possibility, which has been a sort of gradual process. I think of one of the great victory of neoliberalism is presenting itself as this natural system to which there's no alternative. And I would say this idea of, the deficit, how are we going to pay for it, is another expression of that, of the closing off of political imagination, and the sort of limiting possibilities of which begins in conversation.
And I very much agree with that. I would also note that you don't need actually to go to MMT to be thinking in those terms. Keynesianism says exactly the same thing. So
I would say there's a school of people around MMT, and within MMT you've got a sort of a pro-tax, a sort of an anti-tax wing, right, and a pro-spending wing. There are two people, but I think it's important for us to present what we really think, rather than get too clever in trying to guess what's going to be sellable to the public.